Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Brought to you by Junk Be Gone and the Garza Law Firm.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning and welcome into the Sports Source. We appreciate you joining us today. We've got a lot to talk about, all Tennessee football related. We got first week of camp is in the books. What have we learned? We've got recruiting stuff, including the nation's #1 prospect, according to some sites. Tennessee keeps rising higher and higher on his board. We'll discuss that and best case scenarios for recruiting. And then, of course, tonight Peyton Manning goes into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We'll talk about him. We'll talk about the storybook finish to his career, which a lot of special things going on with tonight's induction that are just unusual, that kind of fit with him and his whole story, win the Super Bowl in the last year. We'll get into that. We'll talk about could anybody ever, what would it take for a future Vol to surpass Peyton Manning in terms of legendary status here, in terms of love? And then finally, who in the NFL could wind up in the Pro Football Hall of Fame someday? Think about current VFLs who are out there who may someday be in Canton. It's not a long list. We'll discuss. So, lots to cover. Let's get right into it. First segment of our program brought to you by Junk Be Gone. When it comes to good local companies, folks, you cannot beat Junk Be Gone. Mike Such and his family have built their brand from the ground up. I mean, from logo design to work in the field, they've done it all. I use them religiously. I tell you about them every year because I believe in them. First-class operation, first-class people. There's a reason you see their dumpsters and their signs all over town. JunkBeGone.biz to learn more about a great, great local brand. All right. Let's welcome in the first three members of today's panel. We have from The Athletic, David Ubben back with us. David, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it.
Next to you from WNML AM and FM, you hear him every Monday through Friday, 3 to 7. That'd be Jimmy Himes. Jimmy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, John.
And right next to you, Ryan Callahan, who folks can read at GoVols247.com. Ryan, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Week one of Josh Heupel's fall camp start to his career is now in the books, and I just thought we'd kind of have an open forum here. There's 2 or 3 things that I could throw out, but I just want to get your takes in terms of what's coming, what you might have seen, what's come out of there. Biggest takeaways from week one of Josh Heupel's first camp. Anybody?
Well, I think it's interesting that one of the biggest questions is what do you do with Cade Mays, and it seems like he's found a home. You know, moving out to tackle is interesting. He didn't play. I'm not sure he played any tackle last year, if I recall, maybe a few snaps, but he was mostly at guard, and that's pretty interesting to me. I think certainly in the NFL draft part of that is I'm sure a factor in his head, but there's still some pieces you can move, and he's a versatile piece for you. And but playing him at tackle, I think, is interesting because his body type was a little bit more guard, but he's got to be, prove he's quick and do all those things. But, George liked him at tackle too. So finding that home, I think, is a big piece for Tennessee in week one.
And him going to right tackle, Darnell Wright has moved to left tackle, which, if you're going by the hype coming in to their careers, you would think that Darnell Wright would probably be your left tackle to start the season. But, Jimmy, you were over there a couple times this week. Darnell Wright was in the left tackle, but so was someone else that we talked about in the spring. Well, this walk-on kid's still not going to get a shot, is he?
Dane Davis was running with the first unit at left tackle, and I watched the 2 days that I watched practice. He's a walk-on from Sullivan County who's now on scholarship. And what I observed on those days is that it looked like you had at left tackle Dwayne Davis, at right tackle Cade Mays, Cooper Mays is running at center, and most of the flip-flopping was done at guard. It looked like they've settled on 3 of those positions, but the guard position was the one that was in flux. They ran at least 4 different people in there at the guards with the first units that I was watching.
Carvin and Spraggins, and then Lampley and Harris?
Akporogne was in there at one point. And Lampley was in there too. There were 5 of them actually. But yeah, so I think they're still trying to figure out the guard spot. And also it's kind of hard to ignore Joe Milton's arm, right? I mean, the guy's got a cannon. Okay. You talk about observations in practice, but out.
All right. Ryan, what stood out to you this week? And if you want to chime in on the offensive line, you can. But
yeah, it's kind of the same for me as it is every year. We're drawn to the shiny new toys, like most people probably. And so you look for the newcomers, the guys you haven't seen before. Joe Milton, obviously, top of that list. But I just look at kind of the overall depth of this team and how much the transfers made this team look different it's a noticeably deeper team now at several key spots. Linebacker, that group was a skeleton crew back in the spring. Now there's actually several guys out there that you feel you could put in a game. So you know what they had on paper. But seeing it out there, it's a better looking team. So I'm not going to say it's going to make this team look substantially different in terms of wins and losses, but it's at least now that you see the finished product, you see they've done a pretty good job of patching things up going into this season.
Well, and we'll figure out about how much depth they have. We said last week that one of the musts for this camp was you got to avoid long-term serious injuries to key guys. Kieron Calvert, you've lost a tackle already with a bicep injury, probably out for the year. That to me continues to be. You can talk about who they've brought in, and they're plus 10 in terms of bringing guys in. They're minus nearly 40, minus 30 in terms of guys they've lost. So they do have some guys in the two deep that you say that has helped. That's good. But what about if you have to go through the two deep? What have you got in the background? So when you lose a guy like Calvert from your offensive line at a tackle spot early on, to me that's one of the red flags you can't afford.
Oh yeah, and that wasn't to say too that this is a deep
Sure,
team at
sure,
all.
Sure, sure.
It was just to say they're for
deeper
being
than they were.
Yeah, they're not in a dire situation now. It's a team that actually has enough pieces to field a competitive team in the SEC. But to your point, yeah, they still can't afford injuries like that to be an issue this year at several positions. Tackle, they've got 3 guys as we discussed without Calvert. If he indeed is out for the year, that's a big loss because you don't have a lot of proven guys there. If beyond those 3 we talked about, you're looking at William Parker, Jeremiah Crawford, guys that just got there. So it's not a great situation depth-wise, and it's the same in a lot of positions. Defensive line is that way after losing Darrell Middleton and Greg Emerson. Just not as much depth as you would like to have, and so this team needs to stay healthy really across the board.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a situation at every position. It's like every time somebody gets hurt, it's going to be like, well, it'd be nice to have Wanya Morris and Jameer Johnson sitting around there. If a linebacker tweaks an ankle and he's not going to play, well, it'd be nice to have Henry To'oTo'o and Quavaris Crouch. Like, I feel like this is going to be a factor all season long of every time somebody gets hurt, you're looking around and that December conversation. When your team is whole, it's kind of like, well, they can make this work, they can make this work, and then, when guys get hurt, then you start looking around.
Yeah.
John, there's something else that stood out to me in watching practice. They got some wide receivers that can run. I think Tennessee has a chance to have pretty good depth at that spot. We saw Javonte Payton, who's got really good speed. Velus Jones has really good speed. They've got some guys that can run at that position. Now, in adjusting to the system and all that, I think that certainly remains to be seen. Jalen Hyatt, I think, has made some really nice catches and look good. I think there's very good speed at the receiver position.
What about differences overall in terms of, for those folks who haven't been over there, Pruitt and Heupel, 2 different people, and we've been through this with each coach comes in, brings his own thing to it. What do you think stands out just from what you've seen differences this week? The biggest, well, that's new. Oh, there's music. No, it wasn't music. Oh, it's 100 times faster. Oh, wow, they're actually patting guys on the back and not hitting them over the head with a 2x4. What have you noticed this week that's been a little different than it was under Pruitt? Anything stood out to you?
This is maybe a little bit of a reach, but in talking to some people and watching them, I sense that you've got some players that want to be there. I'm not so sure they wanted to be there in the past. And I think that's filtered throughout the building. But I think these guys are having fun. They're enjoying it. I think there's really good energy at practice. I think the previous staff made it a drudgery, and I think there were players that really didn't necessarily want to come to practice or give a hell of a lot of effort. I think that, to me, I've noticed some of that.
All right, I'll tell you what, we'll get back to that one. When we come back, let's talk about the fact that Josh Heupel, Joe Rex wrote a column this week for The Athletic in which he referred to Heupel as being more normal, which I thought was a good way of putting it. Will his normalcy help him with the job he's got here at Tennessee? We'll discuss that next. Coming back on the Sports Source.